Good evening. I've been covering election campaigns in British Columbia since 1949. And if ever I saw pie in the sky, I saw it today at public expense. The new economy. No, we paid for it, the taxpayers, for this new economy announcement. And we'll find if it means anything for the jobless and unemployed in British Columbia. From Grace McCarthy tonight. But first, Steve is here with the rundown.
The Haida Nation says the Queen Charlotte Islands belong to them. Tonight, part 6 of the series on native land claims with Miles Richardson, president of the Council of the Haida Nation. Also tonight, Mayor Mike Harcourt is moving on. He's giving up City Hall for a shot at provincial politics, and he wants to be the NDP MLA for Vancouver Centre. He's in the studio with Webster. And Grace McCarthy thinks Vancouver can be another Hong Kong or Singapore. She was on the campaign trail today with Premier Bill Vander Zalm promising a trade and financial center here. And she's up first with Webster.
Grace McCarthy is one of the stalwarts. Somebody said once that she was the grand dame of social credit, a remark I would endorse were she old enough, which she is not. But Grace McCarthy, you always seem to walk away from problems and troubles with considerable panache. And I want to tell you that when you said 500,000 jobs today by the year 2000, I almost left your lovely press conference in the Love Boat of all places. You're not serious when you say that the people of British Columbia can look forward to 500,000 jobs in the foreseeable future, though, are you?
I am serious. This is an economic strategy to take us into the year 2000, 14 years from now. It encompasses a plan to enrich and to improve the airports throughout the province.
The money-losing airports?
Bringing people, they are money-losing because they don't have the kind of facilities that will bring the kinds of tourists that are taken right now into the money-losing at one time Banff and Lake Louise, where now we have thousands of Japanese tourists going into Alberta, not going into our
And because
resorts.
you take ownership of the airport, you think they're going to overfly Calgary, come here and go back to somewhere else?
No, we're going to bring them with a good marketing plan, which should have been done years ago to get them into our province.
You should be the tourism minister again.
Well, there's a tremendous economic impetus to be done. But remember how everybody talked about pie in the sky for the very project that you were in today, the Trade and Convention Center. And you're going to be having a guest on the show.
You mean the one built for us by the federal government,
the
federal government expense?
The one initiated by the provincial government and also announced by myself, and one of those things which the pie in the sky, quote unquote, that you just talked about. Also the pie in the sky of the Expo 86. The pie in the sky for SkyTrain.
The pie in the sky for SkyTrain's a little bit doubtful yet.
No, it isn't at all doubtful.
I see you're going to run it out to the airport now.
No, there's no commitment to run it to the airport.
Mentions in here.
It mentions that there's a new entree to put a better transportation system to the airport. It doesn't mention SkyTrain per se.
Anyway, hopefully,
that is a possibility.
If this new economic strategy for non-resource-based industries, back to the old high-tech cape and all the rest of it, succeeds, we'll get 20,000 or 30,000 jobs a year by the year 2000.
We're going to have, according to the municipal governments in the Lower Mainland, we're going to have a growth in the Lower Mainland, which in itself is a figure that we've worked from.
But this is now more important.
And we married that with this infrastructure program, with this infrastructure that's stepped up and is more ambitious than anything we've had presented before.
You've got a Port of Vancouver here which is losing 80,000 containers a year because the feds and the unions have not been able to solve the de-stuffing clause. Now, can you solve the de-stuffing clause when it's under federal jurisdiction?
No, and I'm not promising to do so. However, they are negotiating at this present moment, so it would
No, they're not. They're blanked out at this present moment.
Yes, but they're under...
Are you going to build a new container port at Roberts Bank?
When the need arises, we would want a new container port at Roberts Bank. And you have to know that at the present moment, the Fraser River, the Vancouver port now services well the business that is there. But I foresee a time when Roberts Bank will be a very large port, just like Singapore, just like Hong Kong, if we do our marketing properly and if we aggressively get out and do the work that has to be done.
Enough on that. Let's get down to some whereases right now. Are you not a little bit frightened at the incredible toothy charisma of Mr. Vander Zalm, with everyone going, you know,
I'm so pleased that he's been so
55
well
seats?
embraced.
55 seats?
No, I wouldn't guess on any number of seats.
Can we afford all the promises he's made?
Yes, because he's made very few promises.
He's lifted restraint on the civil servants. He's going to wipe out the CSB, $450 million for an island highway, the highway to Kelowna, more money for the nurses and the hospital workers, HLRA, and we have a debt of $975 million right now in the last year's...
Jack, you know what's important about what Bill Vander Zalm has brought to the province?
Faith, confidence.
Confidence.
Renewal.
And a positive attitude. And you know, I think that's what we've needed for so long in the province, and I'm pleased about that. I'm pleased that people are embracing that
I'm pleased myself,
concept.
but it's a hell of a somersault from Bill Bennett's day, isn't it?
Well, you have to remember that Bill Bennett went through the world recession, and we all went through it with him, and it was a very difficult time to go through.
Nothing's happened to change our finances, but we're getting all this pie in the sky and untold expenditures.
A lot has happened to change our financial picture, and a lot has happened to change our attitude. And it can be summed up in two words, Expo 86. The Expo 86 that some people didn't want to happen in the province of British Columbia, but that we have been able to put at stage and have international accolades because of it. That's what's happened.
Right,
we can do. That's what we're saying. We can do. We have the ability to do it.
One little pointed question. The new line of this government is no subsidies, no bailouts, no handouts.
I believe in that.
Why have you approved a $34 million loan to an American company, Louisiana Pacific, to provide perhaps some jobs in in this wafer board plant? Was that not a straight handout which has embarrassed us on the Countervail negotiations with the states?
That negotiation was done under a previous minister, Don Phillips.
Under your government.
And it's true.
You're the new
social
minister.
Credit government. But let me say this to you.
Is it a good deal?
Yes, it is, in that it hires a lot of people. It provides a lot of jobs.
He's a well-known non-union operator, Louisiana Pacific.
It's a defensible contract or a defensible initiative in job creation. It is defensible for job creation.
$54 million and no interest for the first 3 years and half the prime rate for the second 3 years?
Can I tell you that the Americans make us look like small boys in short pants when it comes to giving away and that kind of subsidy? Just in the Globe and Mail in this last 48 hours was a firm that's offering 2 years all the wages for 2 years in a plant, plus tax benefits if they would only locate in their location.
I'm not talking about the Americans who subsidize.
Well, you're talking
I'm talking about the stated policies of the social credit government.
Let me tell you this, that on that Countervail, one of the stories that hasn't been well told by any government, and particularly our Canadian government, is the fact that we haven't told our story well regarding the kind of giveaways that the Americans have. We just are no match to them.
$6 a bushel for wheat. I know all about that.
No match.
Let's talk about some confusion now. Are you and Mr. Vander Zalm at loggerheads on his gambling plans? Ships between here and Seattle? When you're the one that knocked the bingo back to $2 limits? Are you at loggerheads on this? Do you think we should have gambling on ships and casinos in Whistler and Kelowna?
The only approval that the government has given has been to a trial approval on the Princess ship going to Seattle. That's the only approval that has been given, and it's a trial, and then that will be given over for monitoring and just to see what will happen on it. Personally, I'm not happy about any kind of gambling, but at the same time, we appreciate that a small, that sort of initiative perhaps will be of assistance to the tourism trade on that Princess. On that Princess,
but no gambling casinos for Whistler or Kelowna.
I would hope not.
Good. And you and Mr. Vander Zalm in agreement on your opposition to abortion?
Well, I've never discussed abortion because it's a federal matter, and I have never ever discussed it.
You've never given a position on abortion?
No, I never have, because I feel it's federal legislation. I'm in the provincial government, and I believe it's federal legislation.
And you don't have to tell me whether or not it should be a woman's choice.
I don't have to. If you want, I can tell you.
Yes, please.
Yes, I knew you'd be anxious. I have always said that I think that it should be an individual choice. But that it isn't anything that we in the provincial government should get mixed up in. I think it is a federal legislation, and we have much to debate on the provincial scene.
Will you use some of your lottery funds to support the food bank, say when you're back in full power?
Well, that has never come before the government. And,
not a bad idea, is it?
And the government never in lottery funds sustains anything that requires an ongoing commitment. It only does capital expenditure.
We broke the story the other day on this program about the American withholding tax, which may kill our $200 million industry. Have you had any progress with the feds?
I immediately sent a telegram to the federal government suggesting that since they allow hockey players to have that remission from that tax, that surely a business that brings us and brought us this year $80 million worth of business and will next year probably bring us $100 million worth of business and provide jobs, a business that provides more than some industries that are recognized and established.
So you're fighting the feds
should be exempt.
One last question.
We are fighting them on that, and we believe we'll get somewhere with them, by the way.
What's Skelly's worst promise in your view, from a point of view of BC Shutra?
Oh, I haven't really been analyzing the NDP campaign.
You haven't?
To any
extent. No need to this time?
No, it isn't a question of that. We've been very busy since the announcement trying to get our own Vancouver Little
He wants
Mountain.
to give civil servants, school teachers, the right to strike.
I think Doug Mowat and myself have been so busy with our campaign we haven't been able
Should
to
school
do that.
teachers have the right to strike?
I don't believe that school teachers should have the right to strike, and if that is one of his promises, which I hadn't heard before, but I have to tell you that that would be, I don't think that children need to be used as pawns in a political game any longer in this province, and I think they have been used too much and too often, and it's time we got back to some sensible...
Deputy Premier Grace McCarthy, your calls to her, the calls at this time of night are going quite well, quite bright,
Good.
quite quickly,
Good.
but I want people to have a chance to get at you harder than I generally do after the break.
You've done very well, I thought.
Saw a lot of Grace up at the Whistler Convention, but I haven't seen anything of Bud Smith, the guy who was beaten out in the end. Has he surfaced at all anywhere?
Yes, he's the candidate, along with Claude Richmond, for Kamloops.
Oh, that's great. He could be the next Attorney General in the province of BC. You never know. I'm not asking you that question. I'm really dropping an observation. Go ahead, please.
Jack?
Yeah.
Oh, I want to ask Grace, you know, you were mentioning about the airport, some sort of transportation to the airport. If it's not going to be a SkyTrain system here to the airport, what are you going to have to the airport?
Well, the reason that I responded in that regard is that we would have to have a lot of input from the community, and we haven't had that yet.
Because I think it's really important. I mean, we have the east-west line, which is really great, but I think we really need a north-south line.
I don't want to get into a long discussion about that. I want to ask you about the 1,000 acres behind Roberts Bank. Are you going to develop it this time round? 20 years ago you were going to develop it.
There's actually 4,000 acres of developable land, but it's in the ALR, and there's 2,900 acres on the foreshore owned by the provincial government, and the provincial government owns the full 6,900 acres.
That's going to be one of your great targets for development, though, isn't it?
Yes, and I think there's a great opportunity there for an economic zone. There's a great opportunity there.
Special
economic zone.
That's a federal provincial economic zone.
It would have to be with the blessing of the federal administration. That's true.
In fact, the whole scheme today, the economic strategy, it all depends on federal-provincial cooperation.
Yes, a lot of it does depend on and it depends on union management cooperation. It depends on British Columbians being positive.
Would special economic zones be non-union?
I think that there's an opportunity for both union and non-union.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, good afternoon, Grace, Jack. I'd like to ask Ms. McCarthy what her government's policy will be with regard to the hot edict placed by the BC Federation of Labour on the J.C. Kirchhoff-Hyundai Bridge for the ALRT system into Surrey. I'm concerned that we can look forward to the same kind of confrontation we experienced, what was it, last October or the October before. There's been so many crises in the last few years, it's hard to keep track.
BC Fed have declared some construction project hot, is that right?
I don't think they have yet.
No.
I think there may be a threat, but that hasn't happened as yet. Caller, could you confirm that?
He's gone.
Well, may I just say regarding that there was a very good bidding process done. It was very public. The Federation of Labour and many unions were invited in to take a look at the bidding process, and And they were well satisfied that it was done up and above board, and Kirchhoff Hyundai consortium won the bid, and they were very many dollars less than the others.
And you would not go the NDP way of making only union bids available for government money?
No, absolutely not.
Go ahead, please.
It was well and fairly won.
Go ahead, please.
I'd like to know if Grace McCarthy, if she won the vote, if she would consider legislating the IWA back to work.
No, I would not want to respond in the midst of a problem, a labor dispute at this point in time. I would not want to respond to that. The Premier has responded to it earlier today, I believe, and you may see it on the news, but frankly, I won't insert myself into a labor dispute right in the middle of an election campaign or in the middle of a labor dispute.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, Grace, first of all, I just saw on the news the other day that you brought a commercial running about the jobs, people that have come into Vancouver and British Columbia because of Expo, and it turns out I see them being interviewed and they're saying, gee, this has got nothing to do with us, we were coming anyway. Now I hear you talking about 500,000 jobs between now and the end, and of course no specifics at all. What I want to say to you, isn't it about time that you and Bill cut the bull and give us some beef? I mean, what's going on here? We saw your government last time. We were in a fragile recovery, and everything was going to be just hunky-dory if only we stayed the course. And then, bang, the election is over, and oh my God, things are much worse than we thought. Restraint is going to have to be tightened up.
Well,
I mean, when are you going to level
like
with
you're
people?
Reading the,
Why won't, I mean, Skelly's no help, but here's Vander Zalm. He doesn't even have the guts to stand up and face the issues.
Well, I think that we presented a very strong issue today to answer those who have said that there is no policy in the social credit platform. And there is policy, and there is a vision for the future, and that is well
But he's making a very valid
presented.
point in which he said that after he won the last election, whammoa, all those bills on restraint. Now here's Bill Vander Zalm saying money for hospitals, money for BCGEU, 450 million for highways, etc., etc., etc. And we're going to get the same old double shuffle after the election. Which line was that? 5?
Yeah, Jack,
Yeah.
can I just carry on for a moment?
Yeah.
Okay, you know, it would have been very easy for Mr. Vander Zalm to simply call in the legislature and give us a speech from the throne and put out the proposed legislation.
No, he can't do that until after he wins the election. And if you have anything to say on that double shuffle.
What's he trying to hide?
No, I think, caller, that you're giving a very good explanation of the socialist line. But in effect, we've done a lot in these last few years, and our record in the past few years, I think, is very good. In the city of Vancouver,
unemployment has just gone up just in the last month while Expo's going on. I mean, this is your big upsurge, your big economic effort, and we've got unemployment actually increasing during this period.
Okay, fair enough. You've had your say.
I still think, Jack, that the record in a world recession has been well done. We've well handled it as a people.
It is a culture shock between Bennett and Vander Zalm. Bennett was flat broke and down in his uppers, and Vander Zalm's giving away the world.
Okay, you're asking me to explain the difference in the acceptance from the public. The difference is that we were in a very deep recession, tough to get any message through. The recession is behind us. We now have a new leader who is looking forward to a very positive future, and people are embracing that. As I said, as we started this program, they're wanting to have a positive attitude towards the economy, and there is no question that that prevails in the province today. We have proven what we can do with Expo 86.
We have done that, but the recession is not behind us with respect, deference, and humility. We've got the countervail against it. We've got all kinds of other problems.
We're always going to have a problem. We're always going to have a problem of some kind to present to us, but I think that the people who can well manage the problems and have proven that in the past has been the Social Credit Administration. So there's my political speech for the evening.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, hi, Grace. The polls seem to have the Social Credit Party way out in front right now. And this morning on the news, I seem to hear that the Socreds might win in East Vancouver. Do you have any information on that from the polls?
Well, we'd be very pleased if that would happen. As a person who has come from East Vancouver and who lived in East Vancouver and had a business there for many years, I would like to see East Vancouver have positive leadership and not be in the opposition area.
Well, let's be practical for a moment. Despite the Vander Zalm charm and charisma, the NDP are bound to pick up a hardcore 35% no matter what.
Vancouver East has only been won once in some 45 years. Fred Sharp was the sitting member. and for one short time. But still, we live in hope that Vancouver East will be very positive. We've got a lot of good people there.
The worst thing in the world if you won 55 seats, wouldn't it? It'd be dreadful.
Well, that'd be a nice, that'd be a nice problem to have.
Yes, Jack.
That's from Lumbee.
Yes, Jack. I would just like to mention to say to Grace that they've looked at, or this present government's looked after downtown BC really well. I'd like to know what she's going to do about the rest of the province as far as putting a construction worker back to work.
Well, today we did mention, for example, the entree into upgrading of airports. We have done a lot in the interior of BC. The hub of transportation and the hub in the center of transportation in the province is Prince Rupert and Vancouver. Those were specifically mentioned in the presentation today. But that does not mean that other areas in the province do not have that same kind of...
I just want one reassurance that we've got all this money, we're fine, Bill knows the financial picture, and we can afford all these additional expenses now because you say the recession is behind us.
I think the recession is behind us, and I think that we are starting now on a new initiative, and as I say, a new economy for the province of British Columbia. And I think we can carry that off. I think we can do it because I think the people are tired of the negativism that is represented in
by the NDP.
By the NDP. I think they're tired of that. I think they want to be positive. I think they want to
refuse to believe the recession is behind us.
Well, yes, that's right. I think that certainly the Vancouver area has done very well out of Expo.
Got to chop you off because I've got to give equal time to Mike Harcourt tonight.
Well, I appreciate having the time with you, and I
thank you very much.
Wish you well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. I'm not wishing any one of you well.
You're going to.
No, I will not wish you well. I will not wish any of the people running well. The people can make their choice. And I'll be back with Mike Harcourt, who is still Mayor of Vancouver, after the break. Mike Harcourt, of course, is willingly giving up the job of mayor to become a backbencher in the NDP opposition after October 22. And I want to ask you very bluntly, Mr. Harcourt, off the top, as an old chauvinist, it's easier to be rough with you than it is with Grace McCarthy. Do you think Skelly's doing any kind of a job at all, or is he bound to fall on his face more on this election campaign?
No, I think that Bob Skelly has done an excellent job, Jack, over the last 2 years of reorganizing the NDP, setting up the policies for this election
campaign. But as a campaigner, we were all appalled by his hesitancy on opening night when he lost the place altogether.
Yeah, I think that's
Am I being unfair to him?
I think it's a minor issue. I think that Bob, the success of Bob Skelly is in the candidates that he's attracted to run for the NDP. They're the finest team we've ever had. People like Dave Vickers over in Victoria, the ex-Deputy Attorney General, Darlene Missouri, and a lot of good candidates.
I hope to have some of them on the
policies are very attractive policies with the public. At least we stand for something. We stand for what we would like to see happen in British Columbia, and that's a little different than the tap dance that we're getting so far from the Social Credit Party.
Mind you, stood for a lot of things too, because I remember you being totally against Expo, sending telegrams and wires to people saying, we don't want Expo.
Unless...
You were not keen on BC Stadium. You dragged your feet on the Cambie Street Bridge, and you got to give Social Credit credit. The Expo 86 has been a fabulous success. The bridge is wonderful. And the stadium, I'm not so sure of.
Well, you're only about 100% off target, Jack. That's not like you. Usually only 10% off target.
Just a moment. You're telling me you did not oppose Expo 86?
I'm saying that I said to the Expo people in the provincial government who were trying to convince us that it would cost $75 million. Remember those days?
I remember $75 million.
Right. And I said it's going to cost $1 billion, and I want the city off the promissory note. That was condition one.
And you got that?
Right.
But just for the sake of the
I think this is important.
I'll
tell you why. I fought three election campaigns on those issues and have won increasing margins from the public of Vancouver for the tough stand I took to prevent a Montreal Olympic debt in our city and to prevent the schmozzle of Expo 67, which was a success and 20 years later as an eyesore. I fought a tough battle for the interests of our citizens, and I make no apologies, and we came out the other side smelling like a rose. As a matter of fact, on the Cambie Street Bridge, it was my initiative that got that thing to the public and built. So I don't know where you got the impression that I dragged my heels on it.
I remember you dragging the heels.
No, I was the one that pushed it.
Until you got your fate of the cut, you dragged your heels on it.
No, I had to get it up to the public to get approval to build it. It took me a while to get the council to agree to put it up before the public, but that was my project, Jack. I think you got that one.
You're all in
wrong.
favor of Expo now anyway, because you got the right deal the city wanted.
We got a good deal for the city, and we're using Expo as a way of pushing off into the economy in our second century.
Give you full credit for that. What about BC Place after Expo? Is it going to be a disaster?
No, no. We have approved a rezoning for a large part of the site to be recycled for housing, for offices, for hotels, for marinas, for parks, for public facilities. And Stanley Kwok, I want to give him his due, has done a magnificent job as the president of BC Place of developing a very attractive project that will start January the 1st.
Good. Now,
let's go to unanimous agreement of council what will happen.
Let's go to some of the NDP promises.
Yeah.
End the Compensation Stabilization Board and lift restraint on civil servants.
Well, basically that's saying we need to have collective bargaining back in this province, and that the restraint will be the ability to pay. What we have had in this province over the last little while is a disastrous program of savaging our provincial economy, labor management relations, the education system, social services, and that's, Jack, one of the major issues in this campaign, is that the BC public were misled in the last election. They did not vote for the restraint program that Social Credit brought down on us, that Bill Vander Zalm was part of.
Well, you had Grace McCarthy say the recession is behind us. Do you believe the recession is behind us now?
The recession is still there outside of the Lower Mainland. The recession is savage up in the various natural resource-based areas of the province, and a large part of it was caused because of the depression atmosphere that was created in this province by the restraint package that Bill Vander Zalm and Grace McCarthy were a part of. As a matter of fact, if you look at the Social Credit Leadership Convention results and you look at the announcement by, and I think this is one of the most telling remarks that were made by the nominator of Grace McCarthy, who was the alderman out in Surrey, Rita Johnson, who said, and we're proud that Bill Vander Zalm was the person we sent in to go after the education system as our first target for restraint.
Do you think Bill Vander Zalm, he's obviously going to walk away in the election? You've got to concede that.
I don't concede that at all.
Do you think he's going, if he makes it, will he be a good premier?
I don't concede that at all,
You don't
Jack.
concede it?
I don't concede that at all, and I think the media has been remiss so far in this election campaign in the 60 days when they refused to look at this man's track record, which is appalling. His 10-year track record.
How appalling?
He was the Minister of Human Misery for too many years when he picked on the poor and the disenfranchised in our society. He then left the wreckage there and took over the education system and became the Minister of Miseducation, started the demoralization, the disintegration of the education system, cutting out the English as a second language and the other important programs in Vancouver. Thirdly, he then shifted, after leaving a wreckage there, to be the Minister of Municipal Affairs and centralized power, and wanted to have such draconian controls over local government that even people like Bob McClellan, that eliminated the Human Rights Act and the Human Rights Commission, said it was going too far, and he called his colleagues gutless. I mean, that's the record of this man, and that has not been pointed out, and the media...
Vander Zalm called his colleagues weak and gutless when he quit over that crisis.
That's right. They didn't go far enough. And I think
but maybe what we need is a strong one-man government in Victoria, a guy full of confidence and smiling who will get things done.
Do you know what we need? We need more than somebody that's going to do a tap dance through the tulips in this province. We need somebody that's going to act like a premier. And you know what a premier does? A premier says, here's our program for helping British Columbia after Expo.
Well, now
and we are not getting anything except have you read this?
Well,
this
I read
new
it,
economy for British Columbia, Jack?
Gave Gracie's pitch that this will be 500,000 jobs in the next 24 years.
There is nothing new. This is recycled press releases. There are 4 items here. One is our airport, which has grown from 4 to 23 international carriers over the last 5 years. There's more coming. That's going to happen anyways. There's nothing new there. They say we're going to place BC representatives and embassies into the Pacific Rim. Well, we're only 5 to 10 years behind. Quebec, Ontario, and Alberta already have their own offices, so we're going to place somebody in a back closet after the markets there have opened up. The special enterprise zones they're talking about, our council has unanimously rejected. And the fourth thing, an international financial center is already on the books, is being developed federally by Stanley Hart, the Deputy Minister of Finance, with the assistance of the city. We're on the task force there. There is nothing for the economy. There is no new economy. You know what there is? There's recycled pap. That's what this document is.
Recycled pap from Bill Van der Zalm, who will become what caliber of premier?
Well, I don't think that Bill Van der Zalm can be a premier. If he is saying to the public, elect me because I'm a good singer and I can tap dance, he is not going to be the kind of leadership we need in this province. So I don't have a great deal of confidence. But it's not because of Bill Van der Zalm, very pleasant fellow, he smiles, but he's not showing any leadership.
It's because they've got no economic strategy.
There is no tough, well thought out game plan for the provincial economy, as the NDP has put forward. The New Democrats have put forward a very good, comprehensive cooperative program for recovery in the province.
Okay, Mayor Mike Harcourt, we're going to take calls to Mike Harcourt now, after the break. In November 1984, you slaughtered Van der Zalm when he ran for mayor of Vancouver, but he's obviously going to slaughter Skelly in October '86, isn't he?
Well, I'm of the Casey Stengel and the Yogi Berra school of politics. It ain't over till it's over.
Okay. Did he debate you during that period?
22 different times, Jack. I debated him 22 different times, and I think it's ridiculous. I don't know what this man's trying to hide.
He won't debate Skelly.
I don't know what he's trying to hide. Well, the same reason that I debated him, because that's what democracy is all about, and that's what leadership is all about, is going out, laying it on the line, telling people what you stand
for. So he's
for.
gutless.
I think it's a lack of courage and a lack of leadership on his part. If I can debate him as the incumbent mayor, a very popular mayor elected by a large majority of the time before, 22 different times in one city, sure as heck he can debate Bob Skelly at least once in 147 municipalities throughout this province. I think the man is, that's a very serious error in his part.
You think the man is what?
I think it's a very serious error in his part.
Lack of courage.
I think it's a lack of courage and a lack of leadership.
But it might be good tactics, although Skelly wouldn't seem to be any threat to him.
Listen, it would have been good tactics for me not to debate the guy.
No, it wouldn't too small a town.
He was a temporary visitor from, I don't know where. I can't keep tracks of him.
Fantasy Gardens?
Well, wherever. And I agreed that as a temporary visitor, we'd sit down and show him something about the city of Vancouver.
And you whipped him 22 times. Gosh, what if you get beaten in centre? And were you running?
I'm working hard. Emery Barnes and I are running a Vancouver Centre, and we're working hard. We've got a good campaign committee.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, good evening. I would like to ask Mr. Harcourt what is going to happen to our Sunday liquor laws after Expo.
The Sunday liquor laws, I'm not sure that it was anything other than a temporary addition to British Columbia during the Expo period, sir. So I don't think it's something that, except in a few limited areas.
Hey, it's not life. If you can't drink on Sunday, I don't care about him anyway.
But you can drink on Sunday. They just want wide open drinking in pubs and everything else.
Yeah, wide open gambling.
Do you know how many places? Well, listen, that's a dangerous one. The gambling is something that
I've been through that with
bad one.
Gambling means mafia, pimps, and everything. Yeah. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I tried to get on with Grace McCarthy, but I'm glad I'm on with an NDPer. I was just inquiring about the $10 tax levy for the rapid transit.
Well, that's down. That's gone, ma'am.
That's gone, eh?
Yes, it's down. It's back down to what it was before of $1.60. That was initiated, by the way, by the Greater Vancouver Transit Commission. And there's a good example, Jack, of where it's the same old gang.
Yeah,
there's the same old gang where instead of letting the Regional Transit Commission go ahead and make the announcement that we listen to the public of taking it off, it's the setup, the rotten setup we have for transit. They come in, and Rita Johnson, the new minister, preempts the Regional Transit Commission decision to do that and says, we, the province, are going to do it. It's an example of why we just got more of the same old gang.
And the Regional Transit Committee had already decided to
We'd
get rid of it?
already instructed our staff to take it off, and they came in and said, we've asked them to do it, and we're glad that we did it.
Go ahead,
please. It's the same old gang, Jack.
Go ahead, please.
Hi, Mr. Harcourt.
Yes, hello, sir.
I have two questions for you. First one is, how are you going to react to being a backbencher MLA after having the authority in the city of Vancouver for as long as you've had? And secondly, how soon after Mr. Skelly falls flat in his face after this election are you going to seek the leadership of the NDP?
Well, as I said, I'm from the Yogi Berra School of Politics. It ain't over till it's over, and the only poll that I'm interested in is the one that's taken October the 22nd by the voters.
And you're no Keith Davey either, are you?
That's right. I'm not a rainmaker. I'm into being an optimist and into sunny times for this province with a new government come October the 22nd.
But you know that's what everybody's
I'm bringing some real...
I mean, I didn't ask you that question because you wouldn't answer it, but you know what everybody's saying. That if Skelly gets beaten this time, they'll have to get rid of him quickly so you can take over for the next election.
Well, I think Bob Skelly's doing a good job.
Well, that's, you know, that's a good political answer. Go ahead, please.
Yes, good afternoon, Jack. I'd like to ask Mr. Harcourt a question. Regarding his recent trip to China, he said the day before his trip that we in Vancouver have a rotten transit system, and then the next day he goes to China to sell that system. I'd just like to, for him to explain that, to get the logic of that.
Well, I didn't go to China, sir. I was in Bangkok. So you got the wrong country. Yeah. And the transit system that, I said that we have a transit authority that has 3 or 4 different groups running. I didn't say the transit system. The transit system, the ALRT system, is not the one I would have chosen for Vancouver. I would have chosen a conventional system, and that's very clear.
Sir, I saw the press conference you were announcing at, and that's exactly what you said. We had a rotten transit system, and then you turn around and go to Asia and try and sell it. I
don't understand your point, sir. I said that we have a rotten transit authority set up. The transit system that we are looking at in Bangkok is not determined. It's going to be different than this system here. It's going to be substantially different.
What are you looking at a transit system in Bangkok for anyway?
Because it's Canadian technology we're trying to sell. We're trying to sell the cars, the technology.
Was this a junket?
Yeah, it was a sales trip, Jack.
For Canada?
Sales trip for Canada and for British Columbia. We had, for example...
No, enough of that. I believe
I think it's important.
No, you're going forever.
People that say that you're wasting your time, you don't sell by sitting on your butt. You sell by getting out to your markets and going with your business community to help open doors, and we're very successful.
Go ahead, please.
Hello, Jack.
Yeah.
Good evening. Mr. Harcourt.
Yes, sir.
I would like to say that the 2 terms I believe you've been in as mayor, I'm quite ecstatic about the work you've done for our city.
Thank you.
And second of all, I would also like to see you maybe become leader of the NDP party and give BC something to start striving for, and I believe in everything you say.
Thank you.
Well, I'd like to be part of a Bob Skelly New Democrat government. That's my...
That's your line.
Go
ahead,
that's
please.
Not my line. That's what I'd like to see happen, Jack.
Go ahead, please. And of course, I believe it. I didn't mean that snarky smile that you were disloyal to Skelly or anything, because I know you're not. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I'd like to bring up an issue that was definitely a sticky wicket in the last campaign, and that's with regards to the public service.
Right.
I'm a public servant, and as you're no doubt aware, we just agreed to a 5% increase over the next 33 months or so.
Right.
And in hearkening back to 83, you know, the Socreds were sold then as being conciliators and having a moderate approach, and then, of course, after the campaign, they brought down the axe on civil service.
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned, you know, they talk about their style and sizzle, but when you open the oven, you can't smell a steak, or rather, I smell a rat. And I tend to think that if the Socreds are elected again, we're going to see even more severe restraint imposed.
Well, I think there's 2 issues there, sir, and they're good points you brought up. Number one, are the public of BC going to be fooled again? They were fooled in 1983. We now have a person that is running for premier and is saying, I'm going to campaign on nothing. The NDP is campaigning for something. We're saying, here's what needs to happen in British Columbia in terms of creating jobs for our young people, in terms of reforestation, in terms of women's issues. We've got a good program for British Columbia. What we have, Jack, is a fellow here. It's not a question of style versus substance. It's a question of something versus nothing. The NDP stands for something.
And
the Premier is saying, let me tap, dance, and smile for 28 days. And then trust me, come October the 23rd, I don't think the people of British Columbia are going to be fooled for a second time.
Mike Harcourt, the candidate in Vancouver Centre for the NDP. Thank you, Your Worship. I'll be back after the break.
Good to be here, Jack.
One of the major land claims made by Aboriginal peoples in British Columbia is, of course, the Queen Charlotte's. And it's more than just a land claim. And with me in the studio to explain the ramifications of the claim and the potential solution, perhaps, is Miles Richardson, the president of the Council of the Haida Nation, How old is the Haida Nation? How big is the Haida Nation today?
Well, ever since we as a people have been on this earth, the Haida Nation's been here, and the factual data indicates over 10,000 years.
How many Haida are there today?
There's about 5,000 along the coast here, and approximately another 5,000 that originate from Alaska.
Right. Now, how big is the claim, and does it merely include the land mass of the beautiful Queen Charlotte Islands?
When you're talking about a claim, I don't think you should refer to it as being our claim. What we have is a dispute over ownership and jurisdiction between the Haida Nation and Canada, the governments of Canada. Our people know that there is a nation on this earth called Haida, and that we have a homeland that we refer to as Haida Gwaii. That includes all of the Queen Charlotte Islands, what's referred to as the Queen Charlotte Islands today, the surrounding seas, and also includes parts of southeastern Alaska.
But for the moment, you're dealing only with the government of Canada, because even you, regardless of the rectitude or otherwise, must recognize that you're dealing only with the governments of Canada, and we're not concerned with any claim you might have in Alaska, correct?
Well, that's what we talk with the Canadian government. We really couldn't talk with the Canadian government about Haida territories in Alaska. But in terms of where we are as a people and our relationship with Canada, our people in their wisdom know that today this nation that I've just described to you is faced with that very basic test of all nations that continue, and that's that test of survival.
And if you don't have your land and you're sea-based, you will disappear as a nation maybe 2,000 or 3,000 years down the road.
Well, if you let me continue, I'd explain it to you, that the Haida Nation has existed on Haida Gwaii in our territories for over 10,000 years. Our people have recognized very clearly that the basis of our existence over all of those years, for hundreds of generations, has been our relationship to the land, seas, and resources of our territories. That's what defines us as a people. That's where our identity comes from. That's where our culture derives from. It shapes our culture. For 10,000 years, every living generation of our people has met that challenge of survival. Today, we're faced with quite a severe test, and that test and our ability to survive in the future is directly dependent on maintaining that clear and healthy relationship with our lands and resources, with our territories of Haida Gwaii. These major problems have come about in the last 200-odd years, and they're mainly related to what is happening to our territories, to our land, seas, and resources. The basis of this dispute is centered on that. It's very clear to us that that is the central issue. We need, before we can make any meaningful progress on this issue, to deal with each other, the Haida Nation and Canada, recognizing our existence as peoples, recognizing our existence as nations. And when Canada is addressing this, all the people should remember that our nation has been around for 10,000 years. That's hundreds of generations before Western civilization even began.
I get that.
And we've had very serious problems over the last 200 years. Not that that's the only time we've had problems, but we've got very serious challenges. And the land and resources are the issue.
I respect your emotion and I respect your feeling, but you are faced with a set of facts in which the country was, quote, taken over, dominated by the laws of Canada and also the province of British Columbia.
But
right?
That doesn't necessarily make that right.
Oh, I'm not saying it makes it right, but it means that you, within our democratic structure, must seek something. What do you seek? What do you want?
One thing that you should realize before we get into this discussion is that there is no place in the Canadian democratic structure the bureaucracy or the laws for us as the Haida Nation. There is no place for us in there. That is what we need to negotiate, the basis of the relationship between the Haida Nation and the Canadian governments. That's an option for us. Us being a nation, a clearly defined culture, group of people on this earth, have what's termed in international law, and it's consistent with Canadian law, what's called the right to self-determination. Generally, what that means is that we have a right amongst a world community of nations to freely determine our political status.
I must stop you there because this is only a 9.5-minute segment. Self-determination, does that mean separation from all Canadian government laws, strictures, land titles, and their control of any of the resources?
It does not necessarily mean that.
Well, I must ask you, in the time available, to tell me, in terms that I might be able to understand, recognizing your cultural survival, what do you want?
What we want is to, as was stated previously, to coexist in our homelands that have sustained our people for hundreds of generations. We need to work out the terms on how we respectfully exist together as peoples, in particular on Haida Gwaii. We've stated continually that one of our highest philosophies, and it's in a large measure led to the problems we're finding today, has been one of sharing. Our people resisted intruders to our homeland for a long time. Today we've allowed the Canadian people, and it's not a decision that we've ever stated that we're going to retract on, allowed these people into our lands. We need to work out these agreements based on recognition of ourselves as nations, as peoples, on how we're going to coexist there. And the land and the resources are the basis of that.
I appreciate your emotion. It's difficult for them.
It's not emotion, Jack.
Well, your sincere beliefs, but it's difficult for the man in the street to say now, what do they want? And can I say you want certain title, certain resources, certain sharing, and self-determination, running your own country, your own nation, on your own territory?
Canada couldn't really give us title to our lands. That exists because of our history, because of our relationship to those lands. What we need to do is to negotiate as mutually respecting peoples in that territory how we're going to exist together. The first step in that would be for us to recognize each other.
And negotiate.
And negotiate.
In other words,
and the first step in those negotiations would be how we're going to relate to those lands and seas and resources of Haida territory.
That's becoming clear. My thanks to Miles Richardson, President of the Council of the Haida Nation. Tomorrow, the final in the series on tribal land claims in British Columbia with George Watts, who's very outspoken. Also, we're going to meet Harry Goldberg, the Chief Electoral Officer for all of British Columbia, on how not to foul up your ballot and any questions you have for the election on October 22. And my thanks to you. Stay tuned for NewsHour tomorrow, 5 p.m. precisely for me.